The coffee mug slipped from Mark's trembling hands, shattering against the office floor, just like his carefully constructed walls had crumbled moments before when Claire, his boss of 3 years, had reached across her desk and placed her hand over his. "I know you're scared, Mark," she'd whispered, her eyes holding his. "But am I worth that risk?" And subscribe to catch more stories that will remind you why the heart's greatest gambles often yield life's most precious rewards. Mark Jenkins never planned on raising 8-year-old Emma alone. The single father routine wasn't something he'd rehearsed for, but life rarely sends a script in advance. 3 years ago, when his wife Melissa's car collided with a drunk driver's on a rainy Tuesday evening, Mark's world imploded. One moment he was a happily married software engineer with a 5-year-old daughter and a mortgage, the next, he was drowning in grief, funeral arrangements, and the terrified eyes of a little girl who couldn't understand why mommy wasn't coming home. The first year passed in a blur of grief counseling, learning to braid Emma's hair before school, and figuring out how to answer questions no father should have to address alone. "Does mommy miss me in heaven?" Emma would ask, her small voice breaking the silence of their too-quiet home. Mark would gather her into his arms, his throat tight with unshed tears, and whisper, every single second of every single day, "Sweetheart." Work became Mark's sanctuary, the one place where he could focus on something other than loss. Tempest Technologies had been understanding about his situation, offering flexible hours and remote work options when Emma was sick or school was cancelled. His direct supervisor, Claire Winters, had been particularly supportive, stepping in to cover presentations when Emma's nightmares kept him up all night, or sending him home early when his exhaustion became evident. Claire was everything Mark's chaotic life wasn't: organized, confident, and seemingly unflappable. At 36, she'd climbed the corporate ladder with a determination that earned her both respect and a corner office with a view of the city skyline. Her dark hair was always perfectly styled, her clothes impeccably tailored, and her smile, when she chose to display it, transformed her professional demeanor into something that made Mark's heart skip beats he couldn't afford to miss. "You should ask her out," Mark's sister Jen suggested during one of her weekly dinner visits, 18 months after Melissa's death. She was elbow-deep in soapy dishwater while Mark dried plates beside her. "It's been over a year, Mark. Melissa would want you to be happy." Mark nearly dropped the plate he was drying. "She's my boss, Jen. And I have Emma to think about." "Emma needs to see her dad living, not just existing," Jen replied, handing him another dripping dish. "Besides, I've seen how Claire looks at you when she drops by files. That's not a boss employee look." Mark dismissed his sister's observations, filing them away in the same mental drawer where he kept other impossible things, like the idea of ever feeling whole again, or the notion that he could risk his heart a second time. But seeds, once planted, have a way of taking root. Mark began noticing things about Claire he'd previously ignored, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when concentrating, how her laugh seemed to brighten the fluorescent-lit conference room, the gentle way she spoke to Emma on the occasions when his daughter visited the office. Still, Mark maintained his professional distance. His life had found a delicate balance: work during the day, Emma in the evenings, and the memory of Melissa filling the quiet moments in between. It wasn't happiness, exactly, but it was stable. Safe. And after the ground had been ripped from beneath his feet once before, Mark craved safety above all else. The company retreat changed everything. Tempest Technologies' annual 3-day conference at Mountain Lake Resort was mandatory for all department heads and senior staff. For the first time since Melissa's death, Mark couldn't avoid an overnight work event. After arranging for Emma to stay with his parents, he packed his suitcase with a sense of dread that had nothing to do with work presentations and everything to do with existing outside the careful routines he'd established. The first day passed uneventfully: team-building exercises in the morning, strategy sessions after lunch, and a catered dinner that Mark escaped from as early as politeness allowed. He retreated to the resort's lakeside path, finding a bench where the evening air carried the scent of pine and distant campfires. "Mind some company?" Claire's voice startled him from his thoughts. She stood a few feet away, her usual office attire replaced by jeans and a soft blue sweater that made her eyes seem deeper somehow. Mark gestured to the empty space beside him, and Claire settled there, leaving a careful distance between them. For several minutes, they sat in companionable silence, watching moonlight ripple across the lake's surface. "How's Emma doing with the separation?" Claire finally asked. The question surprised him, not the inquiry itself, but the genuine concern behind it. "She's okay. My parents spoil her rotten, so she probably hasn't even noticed I'm gone." Claire smiled. "I doubt that. She talks about you like you hung the moon and stars. You remember what Emma says?" "I remember everything about your daughter, Mark," Claire replied softly. "She's important to you, so she's important to me." Something shifted in that moment, a subtle realignment that Mark couldn't quite name but felt in his chest nonetheless. Their conversation flowed easily after that, moving from Emma's recent science project to Claire's childhood in a small coastal town, to books they'd both read and movies they'd both seen. Hours passed unnoticed until a security guard politely informed them the grounds were closing for the night. Walking back to their rooms, Mark felt lighter than he had in years. When they reached Claire's door, she turned to him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "I've enjoyed tonight, Mark," she said simply. "Me too," he replied, surprised by how much he meant it. The next morning, Mark found himself searching for Claire at breakfast, disappointed when she was seated at a table with other executives. Throughout the day's sessions, his eyes kept drifting to where she sat across the conference room, occasionally catching her gaze before they both looked away. That evening, they found each other again by the lake, this time walking along its shore rather than sitting. Their conversation picked up as though it had never paused, but with a new undercurrent of awareness that made Mark both nervous and exhilarated. "Why haven't you dated since your wife passed?" Claire asked as they reached a small dock extending into the water. The question was direct but gentle, typical of her straightforward approach. Mark considered deflecting but found himself answering honestly instead. "Partly for Emma. Partly because I'm terrified." He stared out at the dark water. "Loving someone means giving them the power to destroy you. Melissa didn't choose to leave, but the pain was still." He shook his head, unable to find words adequate for the experience. "So you've decided it's safer not to try again," Claire concluded, not as a judgment but as an observation. "Love is always a risk," Mark said quietly. "I'm just not sure I'm brave enough to take it twice." Claire didn't respond immediately. When she did, her voice carried a vulnerability he'd never heard from his confident boss before. "Some risks are worth taking, Mark. Some people are worth being brave for." The air between them charged with unspoken possibilities. For a breathless moment, Mark thought she might kiss him, or he might kiss her. Instead, a burst of laughter from a group of colleagues walking nearby broke the spell, and they returned to their rooms separately, the conversation suspended but not forgotten. The final day of the retreat passed in a blur of closing presentations and departure arrangements. Mark and Claire maintained their professional relationship in front of colleagues, but something had undeniably changed. On the drive back to the city, Mark found himself thinking not of returning to his empty house, but of seeing Claire in the office on Monday. Life resumed its normal rhythm, school drop-offs, project deadlines, dinner routines, but Mark's perspective had shifted. He began noticing opportunities for joy he'd previously overlooked: Emma's laughter during their impromptu living room dance parties, the satisfaction of solving a complex coding problem, the warmth in Claire's smile when they passed in the hallway. 2 weeks after the retreat, Claire called Mark into her office late on a Friday afternoon. He entered to find her standing by the window, backlit by the setting sun, her professional composure firmly in place. "Close the door, please," she requested, waiting until he complied before continuing. "I've been thinking about our conversation at the lake." Mark's heart hammered against his ribs. "Which part?" "The part about risk." Claire moved away from the window, reducing the distance between them. "I respect your boundaries, Mark. I understand your hesitation. But I need to be clear about something. She took a deep breath. I have feelings for you that go beyond professional admiration or friendship. I've tried to ignore them because of our work relationship and because I know your situation is complicated. But after that weekend... She shook her head slightly. I can't pretend anymore. Mark stood frozen, 1,000 thoughts colliding in his mind. Claire continued, her voice steady despite the vulnerability of her words. I'm not asking you for anything you're not ready to give. I just needed you to know where I stand. If you want to keep things strictly professional between us, I'll respect that completely. The silence stretched between them, filled with the weight of her confession and his indecision. Finally, Mark found his voice. I don't know if I'm ready, he admitted. Emma has to be my priority, and the idea of opening myself up to that kind of pain again. He swallowed hard. But I think about you. More than I should. Claire's expression softened. That's enough for now, she said. Just think about it. No pressure, no timeline. Mark nodded, grateful for her understanding yet frustrated by his own fear. As he turned to leave, Claire called his name once more. Mark? For what it's worth, I think you're one of the bravest people I know. Raising Emma alone, rebuilding your life, that takes courage most people can't imagine. Her words followed him home, echoing in his mind as he paid the babysitter and checked on his sleeping daughter. Emma's face was peaceful in slumber, one arm wrapped around the stuffed elephant Melissa had given her for her 4th birthday. Looking at his daughter, Mark realized that Claire was right, he had been brave, not by choice but by necessity. For Emma, he had found strength he never knew he possessed. Could he find that same courage for himself? The question haunted him through a weekend of soccer practice, grocery shopping, and homework help. By Monday morning, Mark had reached no clear conclusion, only a growing awareness that the safe harbor he'd constructed might actually be a prison of his own making. Arriving at the office, he found a memo announcing Claire would be out for the week attending a conference in Chicago. The news brought both relief and disappointment, relief at postponing any awkwardness, disappointment at missing her presence. 3 days into Claire's absence, Emma came down with a fever that kept her home from school. Mark worked remotely, balancing conference calls with temperature checks and soup deliveries. By evening, Emma's fever had broken, but she remained clingy and subdued. "Daddy?" she asked as he tucked her into bed that night. "Do you ever get scared?" Mark sat on the edge of her mattress. "Of course I do, sweetheart. Everyone gets scared sometimes." Emma's small fingers played with the edge of her blanket. "What do you do when you're scared?" "Well," Mark considered, "sometimes I take deep breaths. Sometimes I talk to someone I trust about what's scaring me. And sometimes, I just have to be brave and face the scary thing anyway. Like when Mommy died?" Emma's question was soft but direct, in the unfiltered way of children. Mark's throat tightened. "Yes, like then." Emma was quiet for a moment. "Miss Claire isn't scared of anything. She told me so when she helped me with my math at your office." "Claire helped you with math?" This was news to Mark. Emma nodded. "When you were in that long meeting. I was doing my homework, and I got stuck on fractions. Miss Claire explained them really good. She said she used to be scared of fractions too, but then she practiced and now they're easy." "That was nice of her," Mark said, a warmth spreading through his chest at the image of Claire patiently helping his daughter. "I like Miss Claire," Emma continued, yawning. "She smells like cookies and doesn't talk to me like I'm a baby. And she makes you smile the way you used to smile at Mommy's pictures." Mark froze, stunned by his daughter's perception. "What do you mean, Em?" But Emma's eyes were already closing, her breathing deepening toward sleep. Mark sat beside her for a long time, considering his daughter's words and the truth they contained. When Claire returned from Chicago the following Monday, Mark was waiting in her office with a coffee, prepared exactly as she liked it, and a resolution that had crystallized during her absence. "Welcome back," he said, offering the cup as she entered. Claire accepted it with surprise. "Thank you. How's Emma feeling?" "Janice mentioned she was sick last week." "Much better," Mark replied. "She actually asked about you." "Did she?" Claire smiled, setting down her briefcase. "I'm fond of her, you know. She's quite the remarkable kid." "She gets that from her mother," Mark said automatically, then paused. "And maybe a little from me too." Claire's eyes met his, recognizing the small but significant shift in his words, the acknowledgement of his own worth that had been absent for so long. "I was wondering," Mark continued before his courage could desert him, "if you might like to join Emma and me for dinner this weekend. Nothing fancy, probably pizza and board games, but—" He took a deep breath. "But it would mean a lot to both of us if you came." The smile that bloomed across Claire's face was answer enough, but her words confirmed it. "I'd love that, Mark. Truly." The week passed in a blur of anticipation and preparation. Mark found himself cleaning corners of the house that hadn't seen a dust cloth since Melissa was alive, while Emma excitedly planned which games to play with their guest. By Saturday evening, both Jenkins were nervously awaiting Claire's arrival. "Do you think she'll like my room?" Emma asked, having spent the afternoon arranging her stuffed animals in precise formation. "She'll love it," Mark assured her, straightening a picture frame for the third time. "Just be yourself, sweetheart. That's more than enough." The doorbell rang at exactly 6 o'clock. Claire stood on the porch holding a small gift bag and wearing jeans and a casual blouse rather than her office attire. The transformation made her seem both more approachable and somehow more beautiful. "Hi," Mark said, suddenly feeling like a teenager on his first date. "Hi yourself," Claire replied with a smile that eased his nerves. Emma appeared beside him, uncharacteristically shy. "Hello, Miss Claire." "Hello, Emma." Claire knelt to the girl's level. "I brought you something." She offered the gift bag. "Your dad mentioned you're interested in astronomy." Emma's face lit up as she pulled out a star projector. "Wow! This is so cool. Can we set it up now, Daddy? Please." The evening unfolded with a natural ease that surprised Mark. They ate pizza at the kitchen table, played Monopoly, which Claire won handily, and set up the star projector in Emma's room, creating a ceiling full of constellations that Claire helped identify. Throughout it all, Mark watched his daughter and Claire interact, the gentle way Claire listened to Emma's stories, the respect with which she answered questions, the genuine delight she took in his child's company. After Emma finally fell asleep beneath her new stars, Mark and Claire settled on the living room couch with glasses of wine. "Thank you for tonight," Mark said quietly. "Emma hasn't been this animated in a long time." "She's wonderful," Claire replied. "You've done an amazing job with her, Mark." "I'm trying," he admitted. "Some days are better than others." Claire's hand found his on the couch cushion between them. "That's all any of us can do. Try our best each day." Mark looked down at their joined hands, then up to meet her gaze. "The day you told me how you felt, you said I was brave. I didn't feel brave then. I felt terrified." "Fear and courage aren't opposites," Claire said softly. "They're companions. Courage is feeling the fear and moving forward anyway." "I'm still afraid," Mark confessed. "Of hurting Emma if things don't work out. Of losing someone I care about again. Of changing the life we've built." Claire nodded, understanding in her eyes. "Those are all valid fears. But," Mark continued, turning his hand to properly hold hers, "I'm more afraid of missing something important because I was too scared to try." Emma said something that made me realize, I've been teaching her to be brave in everything except this. "What kind of example am?" "I'll continue the story from where I left off." "But," Mark continued, turning his hand to properly hold hers. "I'm more afraid of missing something important because I was too scared to try." Emma said something that made me realize, I've been teaching her to be brave in everything except this. What kind of example am I setting if I let fear make my decisions? Claire's fingers tightened around his. "What do you want, Mark? Not what you think you should want, or what's safest. What do you actually want?" The question hung between them, simple yet profound. Mark looked around the living room, at the photos of Emma and Melissa that still adorned the walls, at the life he'd carefully reconstructed from the wreckage of tragedy. Then he looked at Claire, patient, strong Claire who had never pushed but had never hidden either. "I want to see where this goes," he said finally. "I want to stop hiding behind my grief. I want Emma to know that love doesn't end with loss." His voice grew steadier with each word. "And I want to know what it feels like to kiss you." Claire's smile was radiant as she leaned toward him. "That," she whispered, "is something I can help with." Their first kiss was gentle, tentative, a question and an answer wrapped together. When they parted, Mark felt something he hadn't experienced in years, possibility. "We'll take it slow," Claire promised, resting her forehead against his. "For Emma's sake and for yours." "And yours," Mark added. "This affects your life too." Claire nodded, appreciating his consideration. "One day at a time, then." "One day at a time," he agreed. That night, after Claire had gone home with plans to join them for a museum trip the following weekend, Mark checked on Emma one last time. His daughter slept peacefully beneath her projected stars, unaware of the conversation that had shifted the trajectory of their lives. Looking at her, Mark felt not guilt but hope that he could show Emma that hearts, even broken ones, could heal and grow and love again. The weeks that followed brought a gradual integration of their lives. Claire joined them for Sunday brunches and Wednesday movie nights. She helped Emma with science projects and taught her to make her grandmother's famous chocolate chip cookies. She and Mark developed a rhythm of stolen moments, coffee before work, lunch breaks spent walking in the park near their office, evening phone calls after Emma was asleep. Their colleagues noticed the change, of course. Office gossip circulated, but Claire handled it with professional grace, making it clear through her actions that their relationship would not affect workplace dynamics. She was still his boss during office hours, still held him to the same standards as every other employee. If anything, Mark found himself working harder, wanting to prove, perhaps to others, perhaps to himself, that his performance remained exemplary. 3 months into their relationship, the first real challenge arose. Emma, who had seemed to accept Claire's presence in their lives, suddenly became withdrawn and sullen when Claire's name was mentioned. "I don't want her to come to my recital," Emma declared the week before her piano performance at school. She sat at the kitchen table, arms crossed, lower lip jutting out in stubborn defiance. Mark sat across from her, confused by the sudden change. "Why not, Em? I thought you liked Claire." "I do like her," Emma admitted, her expression conflicted. But what, sweetheart?" Emma's eyes filled with tears. "But what if you like her more than Mom? What if you forget Mom because of her?" The question pierced Mark's heart. He moved to kneel beside Emma's chair, taking her small hands in his. "Emma, listen to me. No one could ever replace your mom. Not ever. The love I had for her, the love we both have for her, doesn't go away because Claire is in our lives." Emma sniffled. "Promise?" "I promise," Mark said firmly. "Hearts don't work that way. They don't have limited space. They grow to make room for more love without losing what was already there." Emma considered this, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Like when we got fish?" she asked, referring to the goldfish they'd adopted last month. Mark smiled. "Exactly like that. Getting fish didn't make us love each other any less, right? We just had more love to give." Emma nodded slowly, processing the analogy. Can I still keep Mom's picture by my bed even if Claire comes over? Always, Mark assured her. Your mom will always be part of our family, Em. Nothing changes that. That evening, Mark called Claire to explain Emma's concerns. Instead of being hurt or offended, Claire's response was immediate and understanding. Of course she's worried, Claire said. This is all new territory for her. For all of us. I think she's okay now, Mark said. But maybe we should slow things down a bit, give her more time to adjust. There was a brief pause before Claire replied. Actually, I have another idea. If you're open to it. The following day, Claire arrived at their house carrying a small wooden box. She asked to speak with Emma alone, and though Mark was curious, he respected their privacy, retreating to the kitchen while they talked in the living room. 20 minutes later, Emma came running into the kitchen, her eyes bright with excitement. Daddy! Miss Claire brought pictures of her mom. Her mom died too, when she was in college. Mark looked up in surprise as Claire entered behind Emma. He hadn't known this about Claire, she rarely spoke of her family. Claire showed me her special memory box, Emma continued. And she said maybe we could make one for Mom too, with pictures and stuff to keep forever. Claire met Mark's questioning gaze over Emma's head. I thought it might help to know that I understand loss too, she explained quietly. That I would never expect or want to erase Melissa's memory. That night, after Emma had gone to bed still chattering about memory box ideas, Mark held Claire close on the porch swing, overwhelmed by her compassion. You never told me about your mother, he said softly. Claire rested her head against his shoulder. Breast cancer, my sophomore year of college. It was difficult. I'm sorry. It was a long time ago, Claire said. But you never really get over losing someone you love. You just learn to carry it differently. She looked up at him. I would never ask Emma, or you, to forget Melissa. She'll always be Emma's mother, always be your first love. I just hope there might be room for me too, somehow. Mark kissed her forehead, his heart full. There is. There definitely is. Emma's piano recital the following week became a family affair. Mark sat in the school auditorium with Claire beside him and his parents in the adjacent seats. When Emma finished her piece, a slightly wobbly but earnest rendition of For Elise, she looked out at the audience and beamed at the sight of all of them applauding together. After the performance, Mark's mother pulled him aside while his father chatted with Claire and Emma enjoyed cookies at the reception. She's lovely, Mark, his mother said, nodding toward Claire. Melissa would approve. The comment, unexpected but sincere, brought tears to Mark's eyes. You think so? His mother squeezed his arm. I know so. Melissa loved you too much to want you to be alone forever. She watched as Claire laughed at something Emma said. And that woman clearly adores both of you. 6 months into their relationship, Mark and Claire had settled into a comfortable rhythm. They spent weekends together with Emma, maintained professional boundaries at work, and carved out adult time for dinners and occasional overnight stays when Emma visited her grandparents. It wasn't perfect, there were still moments of adjustment, still times when grief ambushed Mark unexpectedly, still occasional confusion from Emma about where everyone fit in their evolving family structure. But beneath the challenges ran a current of joy that had been absent from Mark's life for too long. On a crisp autumn Saturday, almost exactly a year after their conversation by the lake, Mark invited Claire to join him for a walk while Emma attended a friend's birthday party. They strolled through the park where they'd spent many lunch breaks, the trees now ablaze with fall colors. Do you remember what you said to me in your office that day? Mark asked as they reached a quiet bench overlooking the duck pond. About being worth the risk? Claire nodded, her cheeks pink from the cool air. I remember. Mark took both her hands in his. I was so scared then. Terrified of opening myself up to potential pain again. He smiled softly. But you were right. Some risks are worth taking. You were worth taking that chance. Claire's eyes shimmered with emotion. And now? Now I know that loving again wasn't a betrayal of what I had with Melissa. It was an honor to her memory, proof that she taught me how to love so well that even grief couldn't extinguish that capacity. Mark reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. Which is why I'm ready to take another risk. Claire's breath caught as he opened the box to reveal a simple but elegant diamond ring. I'm not asking for an immediate answer, Mark said quickly. I know this affects your career, and Emma, and a dozen other considerations. But I want you to know where my heart is. He took a deep breath. I love you, Claire. Emma loves you. We want you in our lives, not as a visitor or a girlfriend, but as family. Tears spilled down Claire's cheeks as she looked from the ring to Mark's face. Are you sure? Really sure? I've never been more certain of anything, Mark replied. Well, except for one thing. What's that? Mark smiled. That love is always a risk, but the right person makes it a risk worth taking every single time. Claire's answer came not in words but in the kiss she pressed to his lips, in the way she held him close as autumn leaves drifted around them, in the whispered yes that carried all the promise of new beginnings. That evening, when they picked up Emma from her party, the three of them sat together on the living room floor, surrounded by photo albums and mementos. We have something to tell you, Em, Mark began carefully. Something important. Emma looked between them, her perceptive eyes taking in their linked hands and nervous smiles. Are you getting married? She asked bluntly. Mark blinked in surprise. How did you know? Emma rolled her eyes with the exaggerated patience of the young explaining something obvious to adults. Because you look at Ms. Claire the way princes look at princesses in my books. And because Grandma said you bought a ring last week. Claire laughed, the tension broken. And how do you feel about that, Emma? About me becoming part of your family officially? Emma considered the question with serious deliberation. Will you still help me with math homework? Absolutely, Claire promised. And can I be in the wedding? We wouldn't have it any other way, Mark assured her. Emma nodded, decision made. Then I think it's a good idea. She crawled into the space between them, creating a small circle of three. Dad says families come in all different shapes. Ours just has a mom in heaven and a mom on earth. Claire's eyes met Mark's over their daughter's head, both of them moved by Emma's simple wisdom and acceptance. Later that night, after Emma was asleep, Mark found Claire standing in the hallway, looking at the family photos that lined the wall, pictures of him and Melissa and baby Emma, moments from a life that had ended too soon but had been filled with love while it lasted. I was thinking, Claire said as he approached, that we should keep these photos up. Add to them, but not replace them. Mark wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. Building on the foundation, not erasing it. Exactly, Claire turned in his embrace. Your past made you who you are, the man I fell in love with. I would never want to change that. As they stood there in the quiet hallway, surrounded by memories of what had been and possibilities of what could be, Mark realized that the risk he'd been so afraid to take had led him not to more pain, but to healing. Love hadn't guaranteed safety, it never could, but it had offered something far more valuable, the courage to live fully again, to embrace joy without reservation, to build a future that honored the past without being imprisoned by it. And in the end, wasn't that what made any risk worthwhile? The story of the single dad who believed love was always a risk and the boss who asked if she was worth that risk didn't end with a simple happily ever after. It continued in the everyday moments of their blended family, in Emma's growth and occasional struggles, in the balance of work and home, in the wedding that included a special candle lit in Melissa's memory, in the baby boy they welcomed 2 years later who would know his mother in heaven through stories and photographs. Life remained complicated, messy, and occasionally heartbreaking. But it was also rich with connection, resilience, and a love that had been brave enough to risk everything for the chance at something beautiful. If you've stayed with this story until now, perhaps you're facing your own risk, your own crossroads between safety and possibility. Remember Mark's journey from grief to hope, from isolation to connection. Remember that the heart's capacity for love is limitless, that pain and joy can coexist, that the most meaningful rewards often require the greatest courage. Like this video if Mark and Claire's story touched your heart, and subscribe for more stories that remind us all that while love may always be a risk, the right person makes it a risk worth taking every single time.